Welcome to Truman's Town Hall with your host, Matt Truman.
Hello, thank you for downloading the podcast. My name is Matt Truman. I come to you live from San Antonio, Texas. There's a gas station on the corner of Rustic Woods and Taylorsville. Valero, the Valero station. Now, in the 1700s, here in San Antonio, Texas, the Spanish were setting up missions to convert the local tribes, the local Indians, to Catholicism. There's one particular mission that you may have heard of, better known today as the Alamo. But during the 1700s, the Spanish named this mission San Antonio de Valero. The oil company, Valero, is headquartered here in San Antonio, Texas. In 1821, Mexico would win its independence from Spain. In 1836, Texas would win its independence from Mexico, becoming its own republic, its own country. A few short years later, in 1845, Texas would become the 28th state. And then about 160, 70 years later, Sunoco on Taylorsville would change its name to Valero. A little history. San Antonio and Huber Heights are connected. Not just because Matt Truman was born and raised in Huber Heights and moved to San Antonio for a few years. Thankfully, in a few months, I'll be heading back to the Buckeye State. Anyway, a little history lesson before we talk about the April 2nd work session. Tuesday, 6 p.m., City Hall. Be there or be nowhere on Taylorsville Road. Huber Heights has a jam-packed agenda for Tuesday. We're going to go over this real briefly, real quick, but there are millions and millions of dollars that will be discussed on Tuesday. So you may want to tune in or show up or watch at a later time, because all the work sessions and council meetings and some of the commissions are archived and recorded for your viewing pleasure. The first agenda item will be about the National League of Cities Service Line Warranty. You may find that interesting. Now, what I find interesting or impactful to the city may not be the same as you. You may live in a different part of the city where a certain agenda item may be more important to you than it would be, say, someone in another part of the city. So going down the line of the agenda, they have a request for proposals on different software updates for different departments throughout the city, a purchase of a truck for the Public Works Division, supplemental appropriations. Now, this is a big agenda item. Now, like I say on most of my podcasts, supplemental appropriations is always a good item to look at. So when you're looking at the agenda and you want to find something interesting, supplemental appropriations is always going to be an interesting item. Now, they're looking to figure out, or where are they going to allocate the $1.2 million that they have in the general fund that was received because of a land sale the city had done. So that discussion may be appropriate for you to pay attention to. You may want to know where they plan to use that money. In the read ahead, it's talking about economic development. Now, that can mean a lot of things. So tune into that so you can figure out or attend. First, attend the meeting. So I want to get that out there. But attend the meeting and figure out where the city plans to develop economic growth throughout the city using that $1.2 million. Next, you have a request by the city manager asking to, at this point, just asking to apply for a loan or a bond for the Carriage Trails development. That is worth $1.1 million. Will the city go forward on that? Now, for this agenda item, I think would be more impactful to the folks in Carriage Trails area, so they would probably want to definitely pay attention to that because it has to do with infrastructure, building roads for certain development sections. So that's going to be a big idea. But the city will be taking the loan out, so this will affect the entire city. So you may be interested in that. They're not asking to accept the loan yet. They need to apply for it first, and that's all they're asking council to do. So you may have an opinion on that come Tuesday. Also being discussed is the $7 million water softening project. This has been a topic of discussion for many years, water softening in the city of Huber Heights. It will save the taxpayers money personally, but it's going to cost the entire city millions and millions of dollars. So you may be interested to hear this discussion. They also have on the agenda talking about marketing the land the city owns, getting that into private hands and hopefully bringing some money to the city. That could be upwards of millions and millions of dollars into the general fund or wherever they decide to disperse those monies once they sell the land. So you may be interested in how does the city plan to market this land? What will that cost the city to market the land? So that may be an item of discussion you will want to hear as well come Tuesday. On the last work session, they began talking about a Lexington Place development TIF, a non-school TIF. There may be more developed ideas at this work session, so you may want to tune in to that if you're within that area. Now, if you know TIFs, tax increment financing, those monies generated from that development can only be used toward infrastructure. Now, the way I see it, the city has a broad view of infrastructure and can use those monies for different things. I believe the music center came out of a TIF. Carriage Trails, helping develop the roads and things around the new development of Carriage Trails and the subsidies that went along with that. And to just backtrack a little bit, when they were talking about the $1 million loan for the new Carriage Trails, there will be assessments on the homes that will help pay back or will pay back those, as described in the read ahead, to pay back that loan. So, just to go back and backtrack a little bit. And the agenda item that I am most interested in, and it may not be the most interesting thing to you, but for me, is the closure of the Needmore water plant. If I were a citizen, I would have plenty of questions on this agenda item. If you go to hhoh.org, you will see there has been a report generated and provided for you online. It talks about $4 million to retrofit that Needmore water plant to bring it up to standard. I do recall this being discussed a few work sessions back during a city manager report that there have been thousands of dollars put into this water plant to keep it running. But having read this report, you'll see that they attribute some of the discoloration that I've seen posted on Brick City Town Hall. When I was in Huber Heights, I know when I lived on Stonecrest Drive over there by Summerdale and whatnot, I remember experiencing the discoloration of water. I do understand a lot of times that was explained that they were flushing out the fire hydrant, so some of the stuff would get in. Just run your water for 5 to 10 minutes and that would go away. Well, in this report, if you read it, it talks about the coloration is due to this water plant and the system failing. So I don't know. That may need to be worked out a little bit in the discussion portion of this work session. Another question would be, does the city have the $4 million in the water fund to pay for this upgrade to the water plant? If they do not, in the report, it talks about connecting to Dayton's water system for the backup, because apparently the Needmore plant is used for the backup purposes only, and you would have to connect to Dayton's water if you can't spend the $4 million to retrofit the Needmore plant. So everything, generally your water is coming from the Rip Rap Road plant. Another question, if I were a citizen, would be, how did it get to the $4 million mark? There have been in the past monies diverted out of the water fund into other things, projects around the community. Is that an issue? Is that an issue? Was that an issue? Was there not enough money in the water fund to repair the infrastructure for the city? Because if you connect to Dayton's water, you're kind of taking away from the autonomy that Huber has with the water system now. Huber Heights, the city, owns the water. That is their water. They're not connected to Dayton now, but they may have to be. If there isn't $4 million to repair it, that's a heck of a lot of money. That's a huge chunk out of the budget. So that discussion and those questions you may hear answered on April 2nd. They're also going to be talking about commission and board appointments, which is always good to see more folks volunteering in the city. I think as time goes on, there will be, and hopefully, more folks volunteering and stepping up to help out the city and their neighbors. Then you have liquor permit objections. At this time, I don't see any objections to any liquor permits on the agenda. And then the last agenda item, we've talked about this on the podcast previous, the city council compensation, raising that. We talked about that on a previous podcast, and I would like to hear more discussion on that. And I think, as you would, like to hear more discussion on raising council's pay, mayor and city council's pay, raising it. Is it a job meant for service, or is it a job to earn fair compensation? I think an argument for both could be made. I do. I believe that. But the last discussion, when the mayor brought up cruel and unusual punishment, the amount of money that they get versus the time that they put into it, to me, that said a lot. But that's just me. It's meant for service. I don't understand how it could be cruel and unusual punishment. That type of phrase is usually reserved for, I don't know, actual cruel and unusual punishment. And I kid the mayor. Come on. Look, I understand things are said in the moment. I understand that it's not rehearsed. You speak on your feelings sometimes. And hey, the mayor and Richard Schultz, they believe that they're doing a lot of work and they should be fairly compensated. Some, like myself, have argued that, that is interesting, and yes, there should be compensation for council members, but at what type? Should it be based on a number? Should it be based on what you're bringing to the city? Should it be based on what the constituents, how many constituents you have? I mean, there's a lot of different things that you can discuss around this compensation. So that will be an interesting item to hear come Tuesday, just to listen to. And go into all of this, my recommendation is to go into all of this with an open mind. And with that, we'll end the podcast. Thank you for listening to Truman's Town Hall. I look forward